As a result of the Korean War, North Korea and South Korea became some of the most heavily bombed countries in history. In fact, the tonnage of bombs dropped on Korea was roughly equivalent to all of the bombs dropped in the entire Pacific theater of World War II, which includes the two atomic bombs. By the US Air Force's own estimates, the destruction of Korea was actually proportionately greater than that of Japan after the atomic bombs. The philosophy behind the bombing was a successor to the firebombing of Japanese cities in World War II. In fact, it involved the same people. In Korea, firebombing came in the form of napalm, and the US would drop over 30,000 tons of the stuff over Korea. The fire engulfed and destroyed quite literally anything in its path, and completely wiped whole cities and villages off the map. Villages were actually considered by General Douglas MacArthur to be a legitimate military target. Every installation, facility, and village in North Korea now becomes a military and tactical target. By 1951, the Air Force said they had destroyed 145,000 buildings. The US flattened so many structures that they soon started running out of targets. So in July of 1952, the US began a bombing campaign targeting hydroelectric dams. An official US Air Force study would report that in May of 1953, 20 F-84 fighter bombers slammed the Toksan irrigation dam with high explosives. The dam subsequently erupted and water came cascading down, flattening everything. An area 27 miles long was completely obliterated. The US would ultimately attack 20 irrigation dams that provided water for 75% of North Korea's food production. And that was precisely the target. The official Air Force study would boast about the attacks. Quote, "To the communists, the smashing of the dams meant primarily the destruction of their chief sustenance, rice. The Westerner can little conceive the awesome meaning which the loss of this staple food commodity has for the Asian: starvation and slow death." Targeting the food source, bringing the war to the people, targeting civilian refugees, and anything that moves for that matter, is all evident of a pattern of targeting Koreans. There are 4 victim groups in the UN Genocide Convention. What would be the easiest category to argue genocidal intent, in my opinion, is ethnical. This is because Koreans of North and South Korea are both of the same ethnic group. They are both nearly ethnically homogeneous and were even more so at this time. Perhaps nationality can be argued, certainly with regard to North Korea, but nearly all of South Korea was destroyed as well. The British military would conclude as much in their naval periodical. It is no exaggeration to state that South Korea no longer exists as a country. Certainly, dehumanization was achieved by way of racism, so race could reasonably be argued to be another targeted category. The targeting of, quote, Asians through food supply would underline this. Proving intent, or mens rea, is historically difficult. The experience of the criminal tribunals of Rwanda and Yugoslavia provide a bedrock for precedent. These tribunals have found 4 key factors in determining genocidal intent, namely, statements of the accused and his or her associates, the scale of atrocities in question. I would say that almost the entire Korean peninsula is just a terrible mess. Everything is destroyed. There is nothing standing worthy of the name. Systematic targeting of the victim group, and finally, evidence that atrocities were planned. Unfortunately, this area will be left a desert. Of course, by massively killing members of the Korean ethnic group, and by deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, the bombing, strafing, and machine gunnings meet the threshold, in my opinion, of genocide, which was planned and intentional. This occurred in a geographically limited area, and at certainly a substantial scale. The bombing campaign produced one of the highest civilian death tolls in history.